Okay, good morning, everybody. I am proud to be joined by Sheldon Whitehouse, Chris Van Hollen. We expect Senator Cortez Masto. Do we expect Senator Lujan? I believe as well. No, he can't. He couldn't make it. Okay. So, look, I thank my colleagues for joining me on a topic that means so much to us, to the rest of America, and frankly, to every American family. And that is making sure that America pays its debts. Of course, everyone thinks about the fiscal implications for the federal government, but we're here to talk about this as an economic nightmare for every American family. This is devastating for them. It's never happened in the history of the country. It would threaten the health we know of our economy and the very stability of the global financial system just at a time when we're recovering, all at the hands of a handful of MAGA extremists in the House Republican Party. But that's the abstract, almost abstract parts of it. This default would mean real dollars coming out of American families' wallets. Mortgages, car loans, credit card rates would all go up. Moody's, for instance, predicts a default could raise interest rates substantially, a surge in new mortgage rates to over 8%. It is estimated on an average house over the years of a mortgage, it could cost the average mortgage owner $120,000. $120,000 more when you're buying a home for many Americans. Retirement savings. The money workers had spent their entire life for, putting in that money every couple of weeks so they could live a life of some dignity in retirement. They could lose billions as default careens the economy into a stock market crash. A report from Third Way found the average retirement savings would be down $20,000. Every week people put in their $20, their $50, hoping, again, I'll have a decent retirement. $20,000 down the drain because of the brinksmanship and irresponsibility of MAGA Republicans who are playing this default. There are over 65 million seniors relying on Social Security and Medicare to meet ends meet. 1 in 4 seniors relies on Social Security for 90% of their income. Congress can't play a game with this. And we have numbers in our states. In New York, 3.7 million on Medicare and Social Security, 5.8 billion in Social Security checks. And we have the numbers in your releases for Maryland, Rhode Island, Nevada, and New Mexico. So, all of these folks would be at risk as their retirement savings is worth much, much less. Veterans across the country, they rely on their government for their disability, their health care, their pensions, could be left with no support. Medicare reimbursements for our hospitals would go way down. Health care treatment would be worse. Health care treatment would be more expensive. And there'd be massive layoffs at so many of our hospitals, and particularly in rural areas, many of my counties, the hospital is the largest employer. Food on the table, 42 million Americans get it. And so we can think of scenarios. I think of a senior in Albany who can't afford the rent because their Social Security was delayed, a disabled veteran in Baltimore who won't know if he or she can get the care he or she needs, a parent in Albuquerque that relies on SNAP and doesn't know if they can feed their kids, a family in Bristol who just bought their first home, and now their mortgage is sky high, a local hospital in Carson City having room procedures and coverage disrupted. It would be chaos. It would be an economic disaster. Interest rates go skyward. That affects everything: cars, homes, credit cards, student loans. Stock market goes down dramatically. That affects the retirement savings of people who have 401ks, IRAs. It's going to be, as Mark Zandi, hardly a extreme person, hardly a progressive liberal, says it's going to be bedlam. And that's probably the most appropriate word. So we say to Leader McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, we say to our Republican colleagues in the House and Senate, the debt ceiling should not be a bargaining chip because people's lives are at stake. Families' incomes are at stake. People's jobs are at stake. Retirement benefits are at stake. That is why in the past, under Democratic and Republican presidents, we have raised the debt ceiling without brinksmanship, without coming right up to the line and going over it. We must do that again. No hostages, no brinksmanship. Let's get this done. Our view, they ought to show us their plan. We don't believe they have a plan they can actually pass with Republican votes in the House. But that's the first step to moving forward. But when they realize how risky this is and how it affects average Americans, I believe that we can all come together, pass the debt ceiling clean, as President Biden asked for last night. Thank you, and now we have Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chuck, and very well done at explaining the MAGA chaos that erupts if they persist in this pursuit. The full faith and credit of the United States of America is a national asset. It is a pearl beyond price that has withstood wars and depressions. And today's MAGA Republicans threaten its destruction. And they threaten to raise rates for homeowners, for car buyers, for credit card holders, and for people who have insurance policies. They threaten MAGA bedlam. Why? If they want to negotiate, there's a process for that. The Constitution built that process. There are two houses here. You do bicameralism. You follow the Constitution, you put your law forward, you debate it in the public arena, and you see how you do. Why do they not want to use a public process here? Why do they want this resolved behind closed doors? They want this resolved behind closed doors because they know their goals are unpopular. They know they are serving a billionaire, right-wing donor elite, and they know that their wishes, that billionaire right-wing donor elite, are not popular with regular Americans. So Speaker McCarthy won't let his plan see the light of day. He hasn't showed it to you. He hasn't showed it to the American people. He hasn't even tried to pass it in the House. His hidden agenda is the agenda of that Republican billionaire donor elite upon whose dark money this Republican Party floats. They don't like democracy because they can't win through democracy. So they take hostage America's economic security, America's full faith and credit. We really can't let that happen. There are too many people who are counting on this. Are they going to come after Social Security? Are they going to come after Medicare? Are they going to come after veterans? Are they going to come after defense? Are they going to come after military health? What are they going to come after? They won't say. They want to cut a secret deal, and the secrecy alone of this is the best argument against it in a constitutional democracy. And I'll say one last thing. We would not have to be facing this now if all the Republicans hadn't jammed through the Trump tax scam that slashed government revenues and have pitched us to this point now. So to take advantage of their own tax scam, to now threaten this secret devastation of our economy is, for reasons that Biden, I think, has well explained, not an acceptable tactic. We cannot go down this road. It is undemocratic and un-American. Chris.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you, Senator Schumer, for bringing us together here. If one of us in this room or any American got up this morning and said, we're not going to make our mortgage payments, or we're not going to make a car payment, or we're not going to make any of our debts that are due and owing, that family knows there will be consequences. Someone can foreclose on their house. Someone can repossess their car. That is bad damage to the family, and it's limited to the family. If the United States of America says we're not going to pay our bills on time, very bad consequences are imposed on every single American. And Senator Schumer has just provided a list of what happens to American families if we don't pay our debts on time. That's why America has always paid its debts on time, as Senator Whitehouse pointed, because protecting the full faith and credit of the United States is protecting the American people. And it's right here in the Constitution. In addition to the terrible fallout that would happen, our framers recognized how important it was for the United States to maintain that full faith and credit. You've got it right here, 14th Amendment. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. So when the MAGA Republicans in the House say that they're not going to pay our bills on time or threatening not to pay our bills on time, they're essentially threatening terrible economic consequences for every American family, and they're violating their duty under the Constitution of the United States. What the Constitution of the United States says is this debt is not a Republican debt. It's not a Democratic debt. It's debt of the country. This is debt owed by Uncle Sam. This is why we all have a duty to come together and pay it. And what MAGA Republicans are saying that we don't want to do our duty. We are taking the position that in order for us to do our duty, you have to make all these terrible cuts, and they won't even tell us what they are, in order to get us to do the right thing. That's not the way the process works. As Senator Sheldon pointed out, we would not even be here at this particular point in time but for the $2 trillion Trump tax cut that disproportionately benefited the very wealthy and the biggest corporations. 1/4 of the national debt that's accumulated was during the Trump administration, 4 years. This is why Republicans voted 3 times when President Trump was in office with Democrats to raise the debt ceiling. And now when President Biden's in the White House, they simply want to use it as a political club. Look, we've been here before. Back in 2011, Republicans won a majority in the House, and they immediately went about the business of threatening the debt ceiling. Then Vice President Biden was assigned to bring together a group to negotiate. I was part of that group, bicameral, bipartisan. What we learned then is what we know now. Republicans don't care about the deficit or debt. They say that's what they care about. But if they really did, why would they pass a $2 trillion tax cut that's not paid for? Why would one of the first actions out of the House of Representatives be to block funds the IRS needs to go after very wealthy tax cheats, to collect taxes from very wealthy people who already owe that money? Because by denying the IRS that capability, by allowing those wealthy tax cheats off the hook, according to the nonpartisan CBO, they're increasing the deficit and debt by well over $100 billion. So they don't care about that. What they want to do is slash important investments, the American people, and they want to do it behind closed doors. They want to get behind closed doors, as they did back in 2011, and they don't want the American people to know what they want to do. I'll close with this. There's a process for dealing with the budget. We're more than happy to talk about and negotiate the budget. Sheldon Whitehouse is chairing the budget committee. There's a budget resolution process. House Republicans should pass a budget resolution, tell the American people what's in their budget instead of hiding the ball and wanting to go behind closed doors. And they certainly should not be threatening the full faith and credit of the United States, which would devastate American families. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. So my colleagues have been so eloquent on this issue, but it really just comes down to this, and this is what every Nevadan knows, that just like every family, every business, the U.S. government needs to not only pay its bills, but it needs to live within its means. And the debt ceiling that we are talking about right now is paying those bills. Those are the obligations that were incurred under previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and that's what we have an obligation to pay. It is not about future spending. We can have a conversation about future spending and learning to live within our means, and there's a process for us to address that. And you've heard it from my colleagues. That's the budgeting process. That's appropriations. And by the way, should we learn to live within our means? Absolutely. And that's why in the Inflation Reduction Act, we worked hard to ensure that we're reducing the deficit by $300 billion. So there are ways for us to work together to get this done. But unfortunately, the Republican leadership right now in the House would rather play games with people's lives, which seems to me constantly, instead of thinking about the greater good, they're thinking about their own political interests. But with their own political interests in mind, let me just remind my colleagues in the House the impact it has just on the state of Nevada. Because if we are to go into a default, the impact in my state alone would cause a number of things. Housing costs would skyrocket, with a total cost of mortgage going up by $117,000. More than 50,000 Nevadans could lose their jobs. More than 500,000 Nevadans relying on Medicare could lose access to health care. And more than 200,000 Nevada veterans may not be able to receive their benefits, something that I don't think any of us are willing to accept. So there is a lot at stake. I will tell you this. The other thing that we haven't talked about is this very issue. If House Republicans won't work with us to raise the debt limit, it will also threaten our national security. Nevada is home to major military installations from Creech to Nellis Air Force Base to our Naval Air Station to our Army Depot in Hawthorne. A default could make them unable to continue their regular procedures and training. And the 16,000 military personnel in Nevada could be working without a paycheck. That's just in Nevada. Think about the implications across the country. So I urge my colleagues in the House that want to play games to think about and be pragmatic. I know it's a novel concept here in Congress. To be pragmatic about the implications long term and what it really means at the end of the day. Because these are serious complications and implications for so many across this country who expect us to work together to do the right thing and not take action that is going to harm so many across this country. Thank you.
As my colleagues have shown, default is so devastating that going right up to the line is really very, very risky and dangerous for the American people. Go ahead. Ted.
Speaker McCarthy told Biden yesterday that the clean debt ceiling won't pass the House. What about you? Is it a red line for you that only a clean debt ceiling?
Look, we've been very, very clear. We are for a clean debt ceiling. We don't want hostage taking. We don't want brinksmanship. We believe the House cannot pass a debt ceiling bill the way they're talking about it. That if it is very minor cuts, the MAGA Republicans will rebel. If it is major cuts, the more mainstream Republicans will rebel. That's why we're saying, show us your plan. Because I don't think they can get one together. That's why I think that Speaker McCarthy says, let's have discussions, but isn't laying out a plan. Next.
You've said repeatedly that Social Security is something that Republicans may want to threaten, yet Speaker McCarthy has said that that's off the table. Some of your Republican colleagues have proposed legislation that would safeguard Social Security in the event of default. So why do you think Social Security is a legitimate risk?
Here's what we saw during the election of the Speaker, that 20 extreme MAGA Republicans ran the show. There are many of those extreme MAGA Republicans who are calling for cuts in Social Security and or Medicare. Many of them. It's a great worry. Democrats are not going to rest. We're going to keep saying we will not touch Social Security, we will not touch Medicare. Yes, lady in red.
Follow up on that question, because if Speaker McCarthy and President Biden do strike a deal to raise the debt ceiling in conjunction with spending cuts, would you, as leader of the Senate Democrats,
Look, you've heard what I've spoken to the president both before and his staff after the meeting. He had the same position. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, the House Democratic Caucus, the Senate Democratic Caucus, and the president have the exact same position, which is we should pass the debt ceiling clean. That's where we're at. Yes.
So you're being very clear about the debt ceiling and that upcoming decision. However, in a bigger picture, do you believe this country has a debt problem, and what is your plan?
Well, yes, and unlike Republicans, who, for instance, passed the Republican tax cuts on the very wealthy and the ultra-big corporations, which increased the debt by $1.7 trillion, we Democrats have reduced it. A, it's gone down in the Biden years from the Trump years, and B, in the IRA, we passed the first major piece of legislation that said for every dollar we spend, we're putting a dollar to a debt reduction, and it brought it down $300 billion. So the IRA is properly named. It was the first time any party really passed a bill that reduced the deficit. We're proud of that. We believe we can do both. We can reduce the deficit, answer the phone, and this is my intelligence guy. He's always in the skiff, so when he calls, I try to answer it, but I won't now. Yes, in the back, way in the back.
Leader Schumer, do you think that President Biden should put tax revenues on the table with his, as part of his negotiation with Speaker McCarthy?
Look,
as he's pushing this?
as we have said, it was the tax reduction of the Trump tax cuts that helped create this deficit in a very large way, and we didn't hear any Republicans even shrug a shoulder about that at all. So it's our view that debt ceiling, because of the danger, because it would be bedlam, because it would do all of these things, should be done cleanly. If you want to debate closing tax loopholes, which again we did in the IRA and we would like to do more of, if they want to debate spending cuts, that'll be a budget process to do, but it shouldn't be tied to the debt ceiling, plain and simple. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk about the nature of the dialogue, if there is any, on this issue that you are having with Minority Leader McConnell and Speaker?
Well, Leader McConnell has been very clear. He's sort of been similar to what I've been saying and what the president's been saying, which is the House got to go first, and the House has got to decide. It is our view that the House is going to have a very difficult time passing anything, but, you know, we can be from whatever state. Show me. Missouri? We can be from Missouri. Show us. Show us the plan. It's not far from Kentucky. Okay? Our plan is simple. We do have a plan. It's very simple. Pass it. No brinksmanship, no tying things to it. It's a very simple, easy plan that has united Democrats. Last one.
A little bit off topic, Hunter Biden has recently changed his legal strategy where he is going after some of the folks who were involved in publicizing his laptop.
I'm not getting into that. I haven't and I won't. Thank you, everybody.